to rave cosmology and to dying, death, and Bardо. And despite, I guess, the somber, dark nature of the subject, it is, in many ways for me, it is as important as the life itself. We have rarely had an opportunity to grasp the larger mechanics. We've been stargazers and we've been dreamers, but to see behind the veil, to see the gears and to see all the mechanisms, is something that opens up a different way of being able to look at the larger process. And for me, the larger process is a life. It's a life. After all, this is rave cosmology, and I do indulge in the mystical. For the voice, the totality that I call the Biverse, the voice called it a life. I used to poetically call it the child, which I guess poetically it actually should have been the fetus. But nonetheless, the life, the whole, this extraordinary whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And when I think in cosmological terms, when I think in rave cosmological terms, it is so obvious to me that the consciousness field that we participate in is the emerging consciousness, design consciousness, form consciousness of the whole. And that in that way there is a magic to looking at any being. And the magic of looking at any being is the recognition that they are an instrument not simply of the phenomena of their lives, but they are a greater instrument than that. They are an instrument that informs the whole. Now, all of us do that, and all of us do that through our extraordinary relationship with the crystal consciousness ocean. I mean, it's an ocean. And the comings and goings in this process, the way in which we individualize our particular phenomena of incarnation. Our lives are small. We get caught up in them. And anyone who studies human design deeply knows that it is so easy to be caught up in the not-self. It is so easy to be caught up in the domain of mind. It is so easy to see that everything and all things are, something to struggle through, to conquer, we lose perspective. We don't get to see the almost eternal magic, infinite magic of the larger cosmos. And in many ways, talking about dying and death and Bardо is really about recognizing the need for us to surrender to this process. Studying the quarters in the wheel. When you get to study the quarters in the wheel, you suddenly get to this very strange quarter of mutation, and it's sort of like, well, what do we do with this? You've got 16 hexagrams, you've got a whole codon amino acid trail, and every single one of them are specifically related to preparation for moving out. I mean, leaving this plane. It is not a coincidence that the sophistication of humanity is something that has been expressed through, our death and dying rituals. The importance that death has in all of our mythologies, the weight of death, the weight of it, in terms of the way in which it is tied around our throats by religious dogma and the moralities of right and wrong and good and bad and punishment or reward. Death is life. Death is a part of us, always, moment by moment. the cells on the surface of the skin, the cells on the tongue, the cells that are all dying. We're a dying machine. We're always dying. But we magically resurrect. You know, we have this cellular timetable. We keep on resurrecting. When you see the way in which it is played out mechanically, natural death, you see that we all go through natural death every month. All of us. Every month is a preparation for death. And every new month brings resurrection and rebirth. You know, the deepest meaning of the menstrual cycle. You know, this incredible process that we go through, month after month after month, dying all the time. It is us. And yet we are a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, and we do not necessarily notice. We don't notice that we're as much life as we are death. We don't notice that we're as much birth as we are dying. We don't notice. We don't. You see, this is a perfect movement. I like the theme of the orchestra. I like the theme of the global orchestration directories. I like the magic of being an instrument in a movement of a concerto. But as that instrument in that movement, there is something demanded of me, and it is not the quality of my play as I play. We take that for granted. But you see, I've spent my life as a musician. And when you make music with others, if you don't come in at the right time, it's a shattering experience. I mean, everything just stops. If you don't come in properly, everything just stops. And you're lost. You're lost. You know, the magic of a drummer, you know, beating you into unison. And when you leave this plane, you know how you enter into your solo in the ocean of music. How you leave, the perfection of what that leaving can be. How perfect it is. How correct it can be. And if it's not, if you don't know how to go, you create a frequency. You create a frequency that is a disruptive frequency. See, the metaphor of music is one that haunts me because this is the magic of life. You know, it's some great song. And the entering in and the leaving, this is just as important as the staying. It is. And there has been enormous dysfunction in the way in which humanity leaves the body. And it is equivalent to the dysfunction of humanity staying in the body. It is the dysfunction we call not self. And the dysfunction that we call not self is what is normal. Normal. For most of the world, it's normal to die and to be buried within 24 hours. Normal. Just normal. But when you understand the nature of the mechanics, that so-called normality has created all kinds of very bizarre diversity. It has populated our planet with crystals of consciousness that are in mutative form, that serve no specific purpose whatsoever. Crystals of consciousness. They are so magical. I mean, it is always a shock for me to leave Tuesday and Wednesdays behind, PHS and rave psychology, and enter into this domain of cosmology. Because there is the study of the crystals themselves. And the crystals are extraordinary. I mean, they're just extraordinary. And to really understand how the crystals work, because they're quite something. And to realize something about the nature of the crystals. They're so different from each other. See, we don't really get that. We have this illusion that comes from the mental plane. We have this illusion that we are a oneness. I mean, that's our illusion. You know, our illusion is that we are not a universe. You know, we are this singularity. And we're not. And because we only have conscious access to the personality crystal, we have absolutely no respect for design form consciousness. It has to be taught before it can even be recognized. And that these crystals, you know, these crystals have their way. When you think of a personality crystal, it's the closest thing you come to something to ponder that is infinite. I mean, the personality crystal you're endowed with. It has been in existence since the beginning of this cosmos. Our Big Bang, maybe 15 billion years ago. I mean, you're walking around with something that's a part of you, that's billions and billions and billions of years old. It is, in essence, truly your differentiation from everything else. From everything else. The unique infrastructure of that crystal. And an infrastructure of a crystal that over 15 billion years, through its movement in time and space, changes. And over and over and over again, that crystal gets to incarnate. Passenger. The eternal passenger. Vehicle after vehicle. The eternal passenger. And obviously the passenger has a totally different agenda. Everything about the nature of the personality crystal is, in essence, in the normality of our world, to torment the mind until it can finally break. Very different from the agenda of the design. It's to create that idealized form, that perfect form. I mean, each and every one of us has a right to fulfill our purpose through a correct vehicle. And the design is not something that ever gets to linger. It doesn't. It doesn't at all. And you see, every time that you go through an incarnative process, your personality is married to a different design, a different vehicle, an upgraded model, an evolutionary movement. And it's form that conditions all of this. It is form that conditions what the vehicles are going to be. It's the form principle that conditions how many vehicles at any given time are going to be available for passengers. Let's take a look at some illustrations. Excuse me. Well, it's highly stylized. And, basically what is illustrated here is the relationship between the personality crystals and the design crystals. Everything about the personality crystal is that we live in a personality shell. I mean, it's a shell, basically. And to really grasp that, we are limited by the way in which we can perceive frequency. If we had the eyes to see personality crystals and we looked up at the sky, they would look like we were inside of a crystal ball. Pardon the joke, but nonetheless. We are in a shroud of crystal consciousness. And personality crystal consciousness is built on bundles. Bundles. There are so many of them now. And there are so many of them now because of the dysfunction that we call not self, and the inability for humanity to know how to leave this plane and to return from where you came. I mean, those who incarnate, and it's not everybody's job, those that incarnate, they incarnate from a specific personality bundle. It's just the way that it works. But if they do not leave this plane correctly, chances are they will not go back. And if they do not go back, they cannot incarnate again. In fact, they become part of the encounter environment, the minor consciousness fields that people bump into as this or that, the demon, the ghost, the angel, the whatever you want to call it, the alien, and all of that is about leaving this plane. I mean, think about the mystical cultures that we give so much respect to. They all had books of the dead. I mean, they were deeply concerned about how you leave this plane and how to leave this plane correctly. There is nothing more important. You see, leaving this plane gives us an opportunity for a very, very specific experience. The experience of Bardо. I like that name. It's a good one. And Bardo is something that is really extraordinary because, you see, there are Bardо sequences that each and every one of us are designed, are predisposed to follow through, to move through, to leave this plane correctly, and not only to leave it correctly, but not just simply leaving it correctly when in that moment where you lose consciousness in this plane, but to leave it correctly in terms of entering into the Bardо process that is specifically for you. It's your stairway to heaven. It's your gateway to the return. See, without the return, there's no informing. There is so much experiential knowledge that is locked in personality crystal bundles that are made up of forces that have never returned properly. And it's more than that. It's what you get to experience in Bardо. I mean, I think the most fascinating thing about this whole course that we're going to go through is the ability to be able to read the Bardo stages, to recognize precisely what they are, to know what somebody is moving through. It's not that you can prepare them, by the way. It is the magic of death that one, like birth, before one can truly draw the chart, we wait for birth. And before we can truly see the Bardo, we must wait for the moment of death. And in that moment of death, our ability to be able to see the journey. All of us have a right to this journey. It is the completion of our process. And it is clear to me that if there is to be a true transformation in the consciousness field, then those that attain high levels of awareness and consciousness need to return to their source, and that they can only do that by leaving this plane correctly. And like so many things that human design brings, it brings a revolution in the way in which we approach certain things. In this case, the way in which we approach death and the period after death. Because for many societies it would be heretical. And of course we're always dealing with, the religious, spiritual forces that are attached to their millennia-old death rites. In many cases, for example, the Middle East that spawned so many religions, immediate burial was a question of hygiene. Obviously it was very hot. Bodies would deteriorate very quickly. It was necessary to do something about that. You just couldn't leave the dead lying around. And so you end up with a hygienic practice relative to the technology of its time, becoming an ingrained religious dogma in this era, and all along. I mean, when we come to the end of this round, and this is what we are doing, it really is an opportunity to be correct through the whole process. And it's real magic in that sense, to see that this knowledge is not knowledge that stops with, the transformation of the individual life, and how beautiful it is to be transformed in this way through the knowledge. But that the knowledge also leads us to the great mystical doorway, and it is. This magical place where we leave the hardware behind. In our re-emergence as frequency in the frequency field. It's all about the design crystal. Now, the deeper I am in the knowledge, and I keep repeating this because it is essential truth, then unless we get down on our global knees to the form principle, there is no salvation. It's all form principle. And the moment that we are attuned to the potential perfection of the form and the methodology to get there, then all kinds of possibilities are there for the emergence of transcendent consciousness. But one thing at a time. If you're looking at this illustration is about the starting of things. The beginning. The bringing things into existence. The design crystal and its monopole together. I've talked often about love. Love is quite an extraordinary thing. And my example of love, my cosmic example, my universal example of love, is the design crystal in the monopole. I can't think of any other form of love that is more perfect. Perfect in a sense. See, the design crystal and the monopole are naturally one. They fit together perfectly. They just do. And in that perfect togetherness is this deep bond. Our lives break that bond. I mean, it is something to think of. I describe what it is to be human as the sacrifice of love. I mean, we are its breath. We are the waiting gasp as the design and the monopole long to be one. And in the moment that the incarnative mechanics are in play, and the design and its monopole are ready to allow form to emerge, is also the moment of the deepest surrender. Because you see, the moment that the monopole and the design crystal finally reaches and fertilizes the egg and its cellular design crystals, the life process begins. Excuse me. In my work on prenatal knowledge, and by the way, Human Design Austria is just releasing for the first time in English my work on the prenatal and pregnancy, and it's a great piece of work. As a matter of fact, Andrea made a very important contribution to that in terms of being able to look at the various stages in the actual conception mechanics and see them relative to the biology. And if you have a chance, take a look at that, because that's a very exciting book to finally have out in English. It's been out in German for a while. Anyway, in the conception mechanics, the first thing that happens, the first thing that indicates that there is actually a life, that there is going to be a life, is that the monopole and the design crystal separate from each other. They separate. They open up this huge gulf in which the perfection of their love is abandoned for life. For life. I mean, if you want to get poetic and all kinds of things, you can. Because it is very beautiful when you think about it in that context. I mean, they are perfect together. It is an extraordinary sacrifice. And something else to really grasp about the design crystal that you have in your vehicle. It's top dog, number one. It runs the show, after all. See, the personality crystal doesn't have that kind of connection to the monopole. As a matter of fact, the personality crystal is whistled at the way a bellhop would whistle. I mean, the monopole whistles at the personality and calls it into the vehicle. Well, it doesn't even call it into the vehicle. The design doesn't have enough respect for the personality to even let it sit inside the illusion. It doesn't. It sits inside the aura. It sits above the head. But the design crystal has an extraordinary relationship to the monopole. And you know, they know that there's this gulf between them. And they know something else. There's a timing mechanism. They know at some point the life will end. And the magic for them in that life ending is that they return to being love. You know, the monopole is something that is so extraordinary. It's so extraordinary. It makes it all possible. It's the monopole that holds the personality to the design, keeps it connected, juxtaposed so that you can have the realization of the quantum of what it is to be us. It's all monopole. And it is the monopole that drives us along in our geometry. And how helpless the personality is. Think about it. I mean, the personality doesn't even get to flirt with the monopole, you know? I mean, that is just simply not their relationship. It's not easy for the personality. You know, it's like 3 people at a table and 2 of them are in love. Boy, is that uncomfortable. Really. And you see, the personality has a dilemma, because the personality would like to be immortal because it is. I mean, it is, after all. Sort of. I mean, after 15 billion years, you could say that it lasts a long time. but it doesn't get to live out that last long time. All this dying business. And the monopole and the design are so happy that there is death. You know, they make it possible. You know that because of the intensity and the depth of that love, that the moment that the monopole leaves the design, all it can dream of, and I'm truly anthropomorphizing, is the return to the design. And so something happens when the magnetic monopole and the design crystal separate in the early stages of conception mechanics. And what happens is the creation of something very extraordinary, something that science calls serotonin. Serotonin is the timer. Serotonin's a neurotransmitter. According to the voice, that each and every one of us are born with a serotonin production guarantee, sort of, if you know what I mean. In other words, a predictability that we're going to be able to produce so much serotonin in a lifetime, and when that production ends, so do we. And serotonin, this, what would evolve as a neurotransmitter, that this is something that is a direct byproduct of the separation of the design crystal and the monopole. A mechanism by which life is, not doled out in teaspoons, but microscopic eyedroppers of serotonin. And by the way, because the pseudo-health industry is really insane sometimes, there are all kinds of serotonin additives for people, and things to cut down serotonin and things to increase serotonin production. The most dangerous is anything that increases serotonin production, because quite frankly, it is truly taking time off your life in that sense. So there's this mechanism. Like all mechanisms, ultimately it emerges at the biological level, but it's very important to understand that the design crystal and the monopole sort of have a bargain that they created. You know, we will do this, but. And of course, everything about that bargain is to the dismay of the personality. The personality says, hey, wait a minute. Why do we have to do this? You know, why do we have to die? Why can't this form just keep on functioning? What's the matter with you people? You know, why are you shutting down the movie? I don't want to go back out of form. I like it here. I have something to do. I can look out the windows. And the form principle doesn't give a damn about all of that. Because everything is controlled by the design crystal. Everything is controlled by the form. And it doesn't matter whether your personality is this or that. It is held within the potential or lack of potential of the form itself. I mean, you know, it is the same, my comments in PHS about the limitations of intelligence. You know, intelligence is something that is simply limited by the form. It's not limited by how good a teacher you have or how much you get to learn. It's about the level of neural activity in your brain. It is about the potential for the capacity of increased neural activity in the brain. It's about the nutrients necessary to enhance that potential. It's the hardware. And the personality crystal has no access to the hardware. Why do you think there's such fear and trepidation about dying? You know, why the personality suffers so much? It's not part of the process. And that the only time that the personality can be part of the process is that if it has the possibility to go through Bardo. I mean, this is the thing. How can I put this? The only chance for most human beings to be truly aware is in the Bardо stages after death. It's quite something, actually, to think about. Bardо is an extraordinary thing. See, when we're looking at the death process, at the moment of biological death, your design crystal drops down through the central channel. You know, this whole central system that's part of the individual circuitry. Okay, that's nobody's fault. That's actually the server system. I'm sorry about that. It seems that this is a time where we get switched over on servers, and there's a momentary breakdown. So now we can get back. Okay. Yes, third lines indeed. So when we have this coming together again of the design crystal and the magnetic monopole, this is the moment that we have death, biological death. And in this moment, the design crystal and the monopole, they continue their journey downward. If you look at the very opposite of the 60th gate, in other words, if you look at the very bottom of the body graph, there is no gate or number there, but there is an exit. Let's call it the body's emergency exit. But there is an exit, and it is through that exit that the design and the monopole go, and they go down back into the earth, and they reconnect to the design crystal bundle. So let's go back for a minute. You know, we have two different kinds of phenomena. We have personality crystals that are in bundles, thousands of them, in fact, thousands and thousands of bundles, some with millions and millions of personality crystals. And but when we're looking at the design construct is one bundle. One bundle. And that means the entire form principle is literally this one single crystal consciousness field. It is in fact the consciousness of the earth in that sense. It is the form principle consciousness of the possibility of the totality of what life is in form on this plane. It's one of the ways I try to describe what I met. What I met when I met the voice. I lived in a very old, broken down farmhouse, a ruin. And the farmhouse had gone into ruin because there was no more water. And the room that I used for my living quarters, that room was directly over what was an empty cistern, that is, where the water once flowed into. It's clear to me that, the design crystal bundle came very close to my physical form through that cistern. And I just happened to be closer to it than others. That single form has had many names. Sanat Kumara and Shambhala and all kinds of things associated with the heart of the form principle. So the design and the monopole, as they move down, they go through and they re-enter into the design crystal bundle hole. And then we have a strange oddity, an interesting one, after all. The body is dead, but the body deteriorates not that quickly. And one of the most interesting things about the deterioration of the form after death is that there continues to be neural activity. The other thing is that this is a body that does not have a monopole, so it's not connected in any way to movement. There is nothing, in fact, that is guiding this form. It is simply breaking down. And for the first time in its existence, that is the relative existence of its incarnation, that the personality crystal is alone. The so-called outer body experience I mean, death really is an out-of-body experience. I don't mean to be cute, but it's true. Death is an out-of-body experience. The personality crystal, no longer connected to the form principle. And the personality crystal and its ability to be able to tap into the remaining neural activity, precisely the neural activity necessary for the experience of Bardо consciousness. 72 hours. A 72-hour journey of the personality of the passenger as it leaves the form. The perfect journey for the personality. As a matter of fact, the ultimate dream of the personality. To be free of the form and still to be caught on. And so the ultimate magic for the personality crystal is this, incredible journey. This incredible journey in a timeless state. I mean, on the outside, 72 hours is 72 hours. I mean, it's relative to the way in which we measure the illusion. But there's no illusion when you're dead. It's really nice. So, the outside time and inside time, we're not talking about the same things. But we are talking about a journey, an incredible journey. And a journey that is not, and it's the part that's so beautiful, a journey that is not homogenized. I mean, we get different journeys. Different beings get different trips. And so it should be. And there are a lot of variations. A lot of them. I mean, thousands actually. So many different ways that we can leave the form. We all have a right to write our own book of the dead. To get on the bark and to slide out across the river. It's something that is really incredible. And not only is it something that we can grasp with this knowledge, but it's something that we can offer those that are dying. And it's something worthy of offering. It's a trade, actually. The trade is, give us 72 hours. After all, you got nothing to lose. You're going to be dead. But make sure you give yourself those 72 hours. Because if you give yourself those 72 hours, you're going to have the experience of a lifetime. Your personality has waited its entire life for that. I mean, all the great mystics, all goo-goo gaga people, they all dream of it. It was Buddha's dream. Buddha's deep dream, Let me out of the form and I will keep my consciousness. A little bit arrogant, but what to do? And he must have been surprised, at least I hope he was, when he got to the end of the Bardо and the movie was over, I mean, after all. And you see so many human beings, they do not get that journey. They don't. They don't get to have what are essential completion experiences.
Poets know the place. Ancient memories where you know his face, and your heart knows his grace. These we'll see. Palm trees swaying in the night air, taste of forever, Lord, well, it's everywhere. It's so beautiful, it's not fair. It's deceiving. I'd like to welcome you to the package tour of Eden. Put aside your baggage and your disbelieving. He's not like the rest. It's never a matter of what's best. He's the only one who's gonna put you to the test. Well, that's his reason. Let him deep down into your heart. Don't try just to tear him apart. You gotta love him right from the start. No, he's well pleasing. Then he welcome you to the package tour of Eden. Put aside your baggage and all that disbelieving. Poets know the place of these love. Ancient memories where you know his face sometimes, and your heart knows his grace. He's worth seeing. Palm trees sway in the night air. Oh, the taste of forever, Lord, well, it's everywhere. So beautiful, it's not fair. It's deceiving. I'd like to welcome you to the package tour of Eden. Put aside your baggage and all that disbelieving. Put aside that old baggage and all your disbelieving.